Hello, everyone. My name is Annie Fonte. I am here with the Badass Soul Seeking Warrior podcast. I am really looking forward to my conversation today with Larry Indiviglia. He is an author, he's a father, he's a life coach, he's been in the fitness business for years, he holds 2 master's degrees, and he has just recently, within the last month, published his second book. It's called 126 Days, 11 Minutes. We are going to talk about that today, Larry. But first, I would like to peel back some of the layers here. This book, 126 Days, 11 Minutes, is a love story, first and foremost. It is also a story about great loss. And it's not the first time in your life that you've experienced loss. So can you take us back through your earlier life and walk us through some of your experiences and share some of the losses you had prior to the most recent one?
Absolutely, Annie, and thank you for having me on your podcast today, and thank you for all the great work you're doing in service to others. It's very, very inspiring. So I feel honored and humbled to be able to share today with you. Going back, I heard a thing one time, who you are now is where you are when. And sometimes where we were in the past could come by choice or by chance. And sometimes it's a little of both. Although my faith, I am a Christian, I believe God has a plan for all of us. So sometimes it's not all random events. My upbringing was very solid mom and dad, grew up in New York, was blessed to be able to go to the Naval Academy right out of high school. Had a great 4 years there amongst capable men. In those days, it was just all men until my senior year. And we had women that came in, which was awesome. But my first, loss, boy, the first loss prepares you for the next loss. Day after graduation, I was driving my sister, who's 28 years old, Barbara, and my aunt to the airport. We never made it. I was in a horrible accident. I was 21 years old. I was driving the car. They both perished, and I had to move forward. As a young man, as a young person, very, very tough to deal with that. But how we respond ultimately is how we're evaluated. I think how we're looked upon in our lives. I was fortunately only had cuts and bruises. I moved on with my naval career. I came out to San Diego. I had a great 4 years on a ship. I was a surface warfare officer, moved on, did well there, and just put it behind me. And you never forget that type of thing, especially death, especially at such a young age. My biggest thing was my dad said, Larry, you don't have to do anything great. Be yourself. God has saved you so that you will continue on and do something maybe special in your life. Do live your life. And that was very helpful at the time, Annie. That was loss number one at 21 years old. Later on, on my journey, there was a couple of other things. My older brother committed suicide. My older sister died in the accident. He was a broken person. He was a drug addict on controlled substances all his life. He was a functional guy, a very nice man and capable, but he had demons, and at age 53, decided to take his life, overdosed, and died. And that loss was very, very impactful, because when you have brotherly sibling connections, and that one, could I have done more for him? There's always a little bit of sense of guilt. So that one, though, is always a lesson. Remember, I told my kids, your uncle died. Here's some of the reasons. Okay, we talked about drugs. I was very honest with you. Mm-hmm. That these are some of the things that in your life can bring about your ultimate destruction or contribute to it. So there was a lesson there. That was a loss. Before then, my mother died 5 years after my sister perished. Was it because she couldn't deal with her first child being killed in the accident? I don't know that. So there was losses, immediate family. In my fitness career and my marriage, I had a very, very solid things that happened. I broke my neck due to exhaustion. That was a freak accident. And then later on, after my divorce, about 2 years later, I was diagnosed with cancer and stage 1. So all these losses, you think about them, it gave me, in every case, the ability to respond and do something inspiring that I would not have done if that loss hadn't occurred. With every loss, there's also great gain.
Right. Boy, I tell you, having heard what you just talked about, I'm so interested because at 21 years old, you lose a sibling who it sounds like you had a very nice relationship with.
I did.
And 5 years after that, was it 5 years later your mom passed away?
Yeah, it was 5/6 years, yeah.
And then you go on and lose a brother and then other things in your own life. How did you handle the grieving part of any of that?
The grieving part, my faith played a role, and that I felt God has a plan for me. That said, you do have a conversation with God, and you say, this doesn't happen to me. This happens to everybody else. You read about this in the newspapers, and then when it happens to you, you have to accept that. Grieving, the support of others becomes very important in that you don't have to go through the grieving process alone. And the other thing is having a sense that there's a greater purpose for what has happened in your life. And sometimes we can get too philosophical about it or overanalyze it. But I've always been, and maybe it's, Annie, maybe it's self-preservation. Because if it totally broke you, you wouldn't survive. And,
yeah, because at 21, and both your parents were alive then, they lose their oldest child. Was she the oldest in the family?
She was the oldest, and she was a front burner. Barbara was a very talented woman. She was.
Yeah. It's curious to me because I asked myself as I listened to you talk, would I have had the resources, personally had the resources to take all that on and sort it out in a way that was practical and also healthy to move forward? Because I think it's important that we go all through grief. Otherwise, we are running from it our whole lives, and it will catch us if we don't deal with it. And on top of that, you had your parents, and it sounds like your dad said you have to put this behind you, use it to serve, use it to do great good in the world. I'm curious, were there ever feelings of guilt or why me and why them and not me? And
there is. I believe that in being transparent, I don't do cemeteries or memorials well after somebody passes on. I just don't. It reminds me of the end rather than what I've gained through knowing them and my experience with them, my association with them, whether it be a sibling, certainly immediate family member, that's in your DNA. So I don't do well, with that. You do have a sense of a greater, and maybe it's being selfish from the self-preservation, as I just mentioned, that there's a sense of greater purpose in why you were saved. And I never questioned it. I didn't go to any extensive therapy. Do I look for loss? I don't, Annie. I don't. But I'm realistic enough to know that maybe there's a next loss maybe that's going to happen. However, what happened? I immediately had to leave after that accident and go out to sea. I was in Australia and New Zealand within 3 months after that accident. And I was in a very demanding job with some really outstanding guys aboard ship. And I did not have time maybe to process it. I'm being very honest.
Sure.
And in that particular, I had support. I remember the captain of my ship knew what had happened. He talked to me and he said, hey, Larry, we got a job to do out here. If I didn't think you could do it, or if you didn't think you could do it, I don't think you'd be here. So, there was a lot of wisdom there from my dad, from the captain of my ship, and also from my shipmates who supported me. They knew what happened, but we had a job to do. So if I had been back home, wallowing in my bedroom, if I had gotten seriously hurt or injured, I don't know what would have happened, Annie. And I submit that honestly. I don't.
Yeah. You were married for 25 years. You have a son and a daughter.
Yeah.
You went through your divorce, and you were single for the most part, at least in my research, for 8-9 years.
Yeah. I didn't have many relationships. I had one or two that were good, cordial, shorter term, but it didn't lead to anything.
And so in your early to mid 60s, you decide that you are interested in being in relationship again. What created that desire in you after that time frame?
Yeah. Annie, I've been blessed. It's a very insightful question because, how do you get to this place where you want to do something? I've been very, very blessed. One of the people I work for, I am a life and business coach. I work with a guy named Todd Durkin. And we work a lot of exercises. We call it 10 Forms of Wealth. And every month we evaluate where we are in our various aspects of life. Financially, career-wise, sphere of influence, spiritually, legacy, etc. And one of the wealth areas is love. And I looked at the year 2020, the new year, and you score yourself from a 0 to 10, 10 being you can't get any better, 0, this is not good. And I was about a 3, and I said, I need to do something this year consciously to get back into and improve my love area of my life. I think this is super important. I want to do it. I'm not 25 anymore, so time's a wasted. So yeah, I did get into that space consciously, wanting to meet somebody, and my marriage had failed, and I was looking to get connected with a woman, hopefully that I could connect emotionally, spiritually, mentally, and physically, which I had never done on all 4 cylinders, if you will, before.
So you had experienced relationship and love in some aspects with your marriage.
Yes,
but
absolutely.
There was some emptiness or unfulfilledness about that particular relationship.
There was, and in all due respect, my ex-wife, she capable woman, outstanding person, outstanding family. There was just something missing between the two of us that over time we felt that was not going to be repaired. And I don't think we had a desire anymore to go and do the work. So, we chose, to separate and eventually divorce. That said, with every loss, life is like a circle. With every loss, with every journey, when one ends, another begins. And sometimes it doesn't begin right away. Yeah.
Right. So after 9 years, you decide that you are interested in getting from a 3 in your love life to what's the max? 10?
10. Well, at least a 9. 10 is like the ultimate. Do we ever achieve a 10? But at least in the process of getting there, 8, 9, 7, 8, 9.
You wanted to turn up the volume on the love portion of your life circle, if you will, and you went to an online dating service.
I did, yeah.
And tell us how that story goes from there.
Yeah, I had been online for 4 months previously. I'd had another shorter term relationship, which was respectful, didn't lead to anything. Took about a 3.5, almost 4 month break, and then decided to get back in. That's where we're at now in the discussion. And I checked in on a Monday, January 6th, and went through the views who viewed my profile. And there was one lady who viewed my profile, the Tinder, Tender, lioness. And she basically laid it out there, looking for a man 20 miles from where I live, who has lived a fulfilled life with great character, who has a sense of humor, sensuality, sensitivity, kindness, and feels like home.
Amazing. And
it was very short and very concise. And I was attracted to her pictures, but to the simplicity and how meaningful in a few words she translated what she was looking for. So I said, I think I qualify here.
So
So
that was January 6th.
and
You signed up. It was a different online service than you'd used with your first.
correct. Yeah. It was.
So that day you run across this Tinder lioness on your new dating app. Yeah. And the next night you're out for dinner on a first date. Is that correct?
That's correct. We shared authentically on the phone call. In fact, it was interesting. You know, look, we're in our 60s. A lot of times we're not going to do too many texts back and forth. And Gail said, call me. She gave me her number and we spent some time on the phone. I was captivated. She was very, very honest. And it captivated me even more that I wanted to meet her, and we agreed on the next night. So we met the next night, yeah.
And that relationship is what this book you recently published, 126 Days, 11 Minutes, is all about. Because let's share with our audience, there not only was this woman whose name is Gail, was she captivating in so many ways, she also shared something else with you. What was it?
She shared truth. She shared the importance of embracing life for each day, because what was in the past cannot be redone, and there's no guarantees in tomorrow's. We shared admiration, respect, intimacy, romance, in the face of challenge. She having stage 4 cancer. Yeah. And we had an ability to appreciate how fragile life is. She was stage 4 cancer person, 4 years plus fighting it. I had it stage 1 cancer. I had some empathy, Annie, sure, for that diagnosis. Sure. That did help. We did have that in common. And we had the ability to look deeper into one another's souls in a substantial way rather than a superficial way.
I'm curious, do you think, hard to know probably, but do you think if you hadn't been diagnosed and experienced your cancer of your own, that you would have pursued this relationship with Gail, knowing that she had stage 4 cancer?
I would have. I'll say anyway. Annie, I don't follow too many people in life. I kind of have my own compass, and I was very captivated by Gail. If I had not had the empathy at all, would I have been afraid of it? I was in to meet somebody, and many times you have to risk. You're taking a risk to love, especially in this case, maybe even more. But the risk is greater not to love. Yep. And I see the greatness in myself and looking at the greatness in other. There was pure courage in Gail. Yes. And I've seen a lot of that in my life. And when I see it, I want more of it. Right. And I want to discover more about it. Yeah.
So that leads us to your book. I read it this weekend. It took me, I don't know, 3 hours maybe. And it was hard for me to put it down. That's why I was able to read it in such a short period of time. Yeah. Give us a brief summary of 126 Days, 11 Minutes.
Absolutely. It's a true story, number one, of two actively aging it's a true story of two actively aging seniors in their 60s who, possibly against all odds, at our ages, fall madly in love, and one who's battling stage 4 cancer, and who honestly and openly have a great relationship full of fun, adventure, positivity, with an embrace of life and living in the today. And what we learn from each other is the power of love and the power of commitment and the power of unconditional love with no expectations, demands or judgments.
Right.
And we were able to do that because we both loved each other unconditionally first before we could extend that to another. And in so doing, it's 126 days. There's great times, there's dreams, there's challenges, there's certainly cancer. 63 days of great, great joy, health, and many, many things on a daily basis, as I count in the book. And then when the cancer came back, that's a different dimension to the relationship, which is also shared. And I learned it's better to have loved with loss rather than never to have loved at all. And the book will document a lot of our dialogue together, our associations together, our challenges, and our ultimate togetherness through the great parts of life, and then also the challenges in the last stage of life. And it's shared in there. Yeah.
You guys, you and Gail met physically for the first time where you could actually physically be together on January 7th of 2020. She transitioned on May 12th.
May 12th, yeah, of this past year.
So what motivated you to write this book? And you wrote it fast. We're only in November right now.
Yeah.
I mean, in 2 days, it'll be 6 months from her transition.
And that's a question that has come up, Annie, and you know, perhaps a deeper one. And I could best answer it this way. I felt three factors. One, I had lost a soulmate. I had lost a significant woman in my life. As a form of catharsis to get through the grief, the writing helped immensely.
Yeah.
Number two was Gail and my association and love story with her. Living a love story is one thing, writing it is another, especially if it's a true one. There were many lessons I learned from this woman and her life and her approach to life and love. And I really felt I needed to share it with more people. I felt there was many Gayles and perhaps Larrys out there that conventional wisdom says, no, don't get involved. But if you do, you're going to experience something that is very, very meaningful and positive and a lot of learning. So I wanted to share that. And then finally, frankly, you know, Annie, COVID restricted our lifestyles, restricted my ability to work. I actually lost 3 clients, my personal training clients, in some of what I do. I had more time to write, to focus and dedicate to the writing. I felt an urgency to get it down. Emotionally, I felt that urgency as well. I really felt, Annie, at the time, if I had waited till now to write the book, honestly, I don't think I could have done it. And I'm being very transparent about that. So I'm glad I did do it. And I had an accountability person in Kelly Watson who helped me through the process. And every Monday said, Larry, give me some writing.
Right. I'm curious what you just said. If you would have waited any longer or until now, which is 6 months, like I said, in a few days, that since Gail's transition, why do you think you wouldn't have written it?
I think the emotions were so fresh and raw in my mind, and I felt that this time period, this segment of time, was something that was never going to be repeated. I didn't know if COVID was going to be 3 or 4 months, 8 months, whatever. Maybe it was all going to be gone. But I had the opportunity, just like that quote from the movie Miracle by Herb Brooks, Lake Placid, 1980. Hockey team, great moments were born from great opportunity. I felt I had an opportunity. And you know, from a selfish reason, I would be less than honest with you, Annie. In my life, I felt I wanted to create something really meaningful. I felt there was something meaningful and that it was my time to do it. And in essence, share that, because Gail wanted to write a 4th book. She was a photographer, had 3 photography books. My Enlightened Journey, Dancing, Loving, and Living with Stage 4 Breast Cancer. She never got that opportunity. This is not my replacement for her book, but she is well represented and a part of this. And that's why I had to get it out.
Yes, and you did a beautiful job of representing her. You had such a special connection with her, and you've said a couple of times in our conversation today how much she taught you, the lessons she taught you. What are the primary things she taught you?
Love yourself unconditionally, because if you don't, you won't be able to love anybody else unconditionally. And love is the answer, and love must be a part of your life, and it must continue on even if somebody that you really love moves on. Truth. Gail told me when cancer came back and we were in that hospital, I was a lover, a dancer. I took pictures, kind of an interesting way to describe her career, and I fiercely defended my friends in my life. And I always stood in my truth. And standing in your truth, well, what does that mean? That means that you are, Gail was a Virgo. She was very grounded to nature and the earth and the dirt and the sand and the stars and the universe. She felt she was a part of it, which we all are. She is special. And she felt because of that connection, that is life in and of itself, is nature. And nature doesn't lie to you. It's there.
Yes.
It's there. There's no facade about nature. The tides come in, the tides go out, you know. And she, I learned that, and I learned the ability to lead in life. And it's okay as a man to lead in life, and especially my association with a woman, because if you're a good leader, the woman will respond in kind. It's not about, it's the response to the lead. If you're a lousy leader, you're going to get a lousy response, Annie. And I learned to lead and to really love her. Perhaps maybe that she had not been loved before. And I received so much back because I did. Yeah.
Yeah, and I know in the book you shared with the reader, Gail loved Argentine Tango.
Oh.
And as a matter of fact, the cover of your book is a photograph that she took of Argentine Tango dancers. And what you just said about she allowed you to lead. And as a dancer, if you, like, as you shared with the readers in the book, there's nothing like a beautiful leader when you're dancing. It's so easy to follow in the flow if you have somebody leading that is heartfelt and so genuine and so authentic. Talk a little bit about why this Argentine Tango theme was so important, not only in the book, but to her and your relationship.
Argentine Tango to Gail saved her life, or permitted her to live at a high quality of life. She started Argentine Tango in 2008, okay? She was a dancer, she had done ballet, modern dance, but once she discovered Argentine Tango, there was something about it that captivated her. So she was a practitioner, she was a participant, she loved it. And she loved the embrace. The thing about Argentine Tango, it was the overall community of a fellowship of dancers, and it was the power of the embrace with a partner, that you had to be in that space, committed, not distracted, focused, and flow. And when she was battling all her treatments, which involved surgery, radiation, all of that, she kept tango in her life. So she kept going to the tango dancers as much as she could do. Remember, she lost all her hair years back after radiation. She showed up in her GI woman look and went down on the dance floor. And so it kept her alive from the soul, she used to tell me, from her feet to her soul, is that the movement was just so pure. The embrace and the intimacy of the embrace was the foundation for the intricacy of the dance. And it was all about leading, and it was always about following, and then how that just meshed together. But in many ways, many ways, Argentine Tango, and then she developed as part of her photography business. She loved it so much, she photographed tango dancers and created a book about it, Tango or More. So it was part of her DNA, and she loved the movement. And it was like life was a dance. Each step should be cherished. And the dance goes on, even though the partner may go on.
Well, and I think because you became the main coordinator and the advocate for her medical care. And she was very clear, as I read in your book, about, I trust you, Larry, take the lead on this. I know you will make the right decisions for me. Talk about going from being a lover and a friend and a companion and a great conversationalist and all those things you had in your romantic partnership relationship into this position of, I am now taking on and committed to being the advocate for this person's healthcare as they go through the last bits of their life. What was that like for you emotionally, and what's involved in that process?
Ultimately, it's a gift when looking back on it. And sometimes we have to experience love lessons to fully understand them. And that was another level of connection with Gail. The important thing about it is, as an advocate, as a patient care advocate, and then caregiver on some level, and I had a whole heck of a lot of help, which I talk about in the book, with the inpatient hospice. But prior to that, in listening to the patient, listening to his or her needs, what may be important to you may not be important to them. Gail considered aid in dying. She ultimately didn't go that way, but she wanted to get information on it. She did not want to die in pain. Absolutely, she did not. I don't think any of us do, but she didn't. So it forced me to listen to her needs, whether I agreed or not. She did not want to die at my home. She did not want to put that burden on me for the future. She did not want to die in my home. She did not want to die in her mother's home. So there was things that she was still processing, but she had the confidence, Blair, let's get the information. Where I think I can make a decision, I will, but when I can't, I'll surrender to you. And then I trust the decision you'll make. Heavy load, a lot of prayer. However, the important thing is to die, Annie, in dignity, and to hold on to your truth to the end. And you know what? She did that. I was able to help her do that. I couldn't provide peace for her. We all have to find our own peace, mentally, emotionally. Physically, we did provide her peace. But I felt that this was a profound gift that I was given. And I was going to take it to, till the day of transition, or as far as I could. I didn't know how long I was going to be able to do it. But those were some of the things I felt. Yeah,
and the two of you had this remarkable connection because Gail's mom is still living.
She is, yeah. She's in her late 80s, yes.
Has what sounds like a lovely boyfriend in Jim, and Gail has a brother George, and she had dear friends, and ultimately you were the one that she chose to manage this part of her life for her.
Yeah.
And she'd known you before she got really sick. She'd known you what?
63 days, 70 days.
Yeah.
Annie, some things, connections in life are not random. There's a special connection we have with people. You can't manufacture. It was beyond chemistry, actually.
Yeah.
And it was, I'll tell you, Gail's life made a difference to a lot of people. And I don't want to say it mattered. You know, you hear what kind of lives mattered, but her life did matter to a lot. And I felt for all the people in cancer treatment or that diagnosis, especially stage 4, there's a tendency just to put a number on their lives, and they get casted aside as if maybe they don't make a difference, or their life is now in the shadow of cancer and defined by such. And I really felt if I could do something to make sure that Gail felt that she was loved to the end. And I did have help. You know, George helped me out, Jim helped me out, Gail's mom visited. But the mere fact she trusted me. And I think because of our special relationship, there was trust, there was then intimacy, and with intimacy, then there's romance, and it leads to then a very, very deep connection. And we took all those steps and had that during those 63, 70 days when she was relatively healthy, and we were able to do things together. So yeah, that's how I probably kind of look at that part of it.
And ultimately, she was put in hospice. And I will tell you, I have experienced hospice care as a person who has lost friends. I've also experienced it because my mom ended her nursing career as a hospice nurse.
Oh, yeah.
They are remarkably beautiful people with such empathy and compassionate souls and hearts. And you had a very special relationship with this hospice team where Gail was in her final days. Talk a little bit about that and how they kind of helped you manage the emotional side of this situation you found yourself in.
Yeah, the important thing for somebody, I believe, who's dying in their last stages of life before transition, they still want to be connected to real life in some way. And I felt the staff at Parkview, and I have no problem. I tell the name in the book, you know, Sharp Hospice Care, Parkview Home in Del Cerro, not too far from San Diego State. They provided a touch of real life. You're still a real person. You still need to comb your hair. You still need to do things that we normally do every day. And they take care of those particular needs. They also talk to the patient as much as they possibly can. They talk to the loved ones. We're like in a very special, intimate home. They were always sensitive to my needs as a caregiver and being the primary person there. And of course, always to Gail's. And their gift, they feel it's a privilege to actually be able to serve every one of them. And I really had close associations with 32 in hospice. And then the spiritual counselors outside, because they couldn't be there because of COVID. But the music therapist would look at flowers. They would always notice something to bring into the mix, to bring into the daily routine, if you could even say a routine. There's no routine in transitioning. But also listening to me. I sometimes had my moments. You know, they would listen to me, but always very, very responsive, always very observant of what was going on, and pure love in there, and also very, very compassionate as far as pain relief, and making it special for the family members, and of course the person who is eventually transitioning. But it was just a super experience across the board.
Yeah, I won't say, because I want everybody to get this book and read it. The room Gail was in was room number 3. And that has significance in your story because of the time you shared in the early part of your relationship. And you watched people come into room number 2 and number 1 and number 4, many while Gail was there. that
Yeah.
came and went and came and went. And how did that affect your own personal emotion as you witnessed this? You would come one day and that room was empty, and then the next day it had someone else in it, and then another room in a week or two might have been empty because these people were transitioning. Was that difficult for you to manage all this coming and going of life and still be present and available for Gail and to provide her what she needed?
That's a very insightful question, Annie, because it does remind you of the ultimate destination, if you will, transitioning to a higher level of consciousness. It's going to happen. Gail was the youngest patient in Parkview when she was there at 68. She was in relatively very good shape. Other than her cancer, she was in very good health, okay? Her body had been broken down by some of the cancer, but she was in good health otherwise. Her lungs were strong, her heart was strong. People who were coming in were older. However, you see the family members coming in, and obviously they're distressed. I couldn't interact with any of them, but sometimes you could see them, and you see the bed is full one day, and then the next day I come in, they're gone with the teddy bear there. And it, even though the inevitable, the sadness of the inevitable, I was able to grasp each day the tenderness, I'll use that word again, of the present day. And that's what I was able to do to get through that. I would say a prayer, see it open. I wonder what he died of. I wonder what she died of. I never really knew who was in that room. And, but I was able to at least capture the tenderness of each day, even though of the inevitability of somebody transitioning, to the next level. That's kind of how I was able to get through that. And then through the help of the hospice people too, they embraced every person there.
Right.
They feel at home.
There's a part in the book when Gail, and this is fairly typical of folks who are experiencing her type of cancer, they go through what can be anger, but not intentional. And this, when I read this in the book, I had to stop and just put the book down for a minute, because you came to visit her one day and she was mad, and she expressed, I don't think she was mad and not a loving way, but it was part of what she was going through dealing with this disease. And she said, "This is all your fault. I don't want to be here." She just really kind of laid into you.
Yeah.
That had to have been, even though knowing that was her disease talking, that had to have been, for me, it was one of those moments that kind of took my breath away. How did you absorb that and let that go through you and say, okay, I understand, you don't really mean that, because you loved her so much?
Yeah, we're human beings, and that was a tough day or a day and a half, whenever it was. And it's interesting. I went back to my devotional to help, obviously my daily devotional. Gail's favorite book was The Four Agreements. One of the four agreements is, do not take anything personally.
Yeah.
And okay, now you could say that,
yeah.
But when you're in that, and it was, my fear was, how long is this going to last? Mm-hmm. Because I hadn't viewed brain cancer from that vantage point ever. So I didn't know. And then that's where the staff helped me and said, this will happen. And, but at the time, it was startling. And I just know that, and you're right, Annie, you're very perceptive here. Gail did not want to die.
Right.
I want to be very clear about that.
Yeah.
She did not want to die. And she had emotional tears at points of that whole last stage. She did not want to go. Right. She felt she had more to do. And that can be overwhelming. And then, of course, when the chemistry of the brain changes, it's not singing Kumbaya and like a movie scene. It just isn't.
Yeah, I got the sense clearly that she was an enormously courageous and strong woman. And one of the things that she asked you to promise her was that you would love again. Are you going to keep
Yeah.
that promise to her?
Yeah, I have. I have. And it's interesting that Gail broke my heart open. She didn't break my heart. She broke my heart open that, you know what, this mental, physical, emotional, spiritual connection with a woman is possible. Just like in dance, one partner may leave, but the dance must go on. The dance of life must go on. The dance of love must go on. And that is important to maintain that in your life. And because of that, I was now better able into the next relationship to be able to view it with more confidence rather than, well, is this possible? You know, am I still skeptical that is this even possible with a woman? Now I know it is. And that led to the next relationship. Through the processing and production of the book, I met Elizabeth, and it's still early in the relationship, but I firmly believe that Gail was a catalyst to help me on my next relationship, rather than don't mourn me, Larry, for the rest of your life. And please don't do that. You've only known me 4 months. I think I'm a great gal and I'm a great woman, but I don't know if I'm that great. Okay, move on. And just as I was able to respond in some other losses, although this is a different response, Annie, I've been able to do that up to now. We'll see where it all goes, but yeah.
What words of wisdom, since you can speak to both sides of this now, you were in a marriage, a long relationship, 25 years. You were in a 4-month relationship with a beautiful woman, a few in between there. What words of wisdom would you leave our listeners, regardless if they're male, female, married, single, whatever stage they are in their relationship, about love and allowing yourself to love and loving someone else?
Well, you know, that's a deep question. That's a deep question. Gail would sing the line from the song Nature Boy, the greatest thing you'll ever learn is just to love and be loved in return. Very powerful lyric. And the thing about it, that lyric, is to be able to give love. We could give love and give love and give love, but if we don't receive it, if we don't communicate that to our partner, to our significant other, to our spouse, you need to communicate that. We all have needs. I think women may have different needs than men, vice versa. We have some similar needs, whether you get into the love languages or things like that. But it's very important to number one, love yourself unconditionally first, which I mentioned once, before you could love somebody in this conditional world unconditionally. Not an easy thing to do, but man, I'm telling you, Annie, when you get that person that you're connected to deeply, there's not anything like it. And it will really uplift and elevate your life. And then you'll look back and say, God, how did I spend all the time alone? Or how do I spend the time not experiencing this? But we must be open to it. And love comes to everyone if you're open to it and you so choose. And don't be afraid to love. Don't be afraid. You know, society may tell you one thing or whatever. Follow your heart. Heart doesn't have any questions. Sometimes we think it does.
Yeah, I think that's so true. We have to learn to love ourselves unconditionally, not from an egotistical viewpoint, but unconditionally. And I think you said something earlier too that is such an important part of that is we have to become at peace with ourselves too. It's part of that unconditional love, is allowing yourself to be at peace with who you are and be at peace with yourself, because then you can really allow others, hold space for others to do that for themselves if they haven't already.
Yeah, in the book, I do relay that that one short story about my friend Colonel Hank,
Mm-hmm.
who had experienced a lot of battle, many, many years being a Marine Corps officer. Finding peace first, Larry. You can't provide peace for Gail necessarily. Find your own peace first, and I think you'll find that Gail will eventually find hers. And I think people in cancer treatment, you know, there's faith and there's hope for a miracle. Hopefully that they can be cured. And in that process, there's fear and pain, but then they get strong, steely strong. And at some point, they need to find their peace, whatever that is.
Yeah, right. Yeah, that's probably the most difficult part of their journey, I'm sure. I can only imagine it would be. So, Larry, what's next for you? What can we expect next from you? You're a life coach, you're in fitness, you're an author,
Yeah,
you're in a new relationship. You got a lot of good stuff going on.
a lot of stuff on the plate, and you create one thing and it can lead to another, but it never just happens. I always say a lot of people like Coach Andy, and I'm sure in your walk and what you do, is if you put yourself out there authentically, when you're your essential self, and you're willing to do that, something great will emerge. It won't just happen. It will emerge because you did that you can't predict. So my goal right now is to get 126 days, 11 minutes, our love story out through as many channels as I can. And then the second tier of this is going to be get the audiobook out, which will come out in late December. And then to come up with a workbook of the lessons from 126, 11, because there's many not only on relationships, on caregiving, on courage, on just on life. What is positive? What is possible? And the book, as you know, it's an inspiring read because it's a full swath of life. It's not just about dying, that's certainly part of it, but the inspiration and the courage that people have. It's about life, it's about love. And man, those are two powerful things. And I guess it's about leading, you know, as a man and as a woman.
And what I so appreciated about what Gail communicated many times to you in your short relationship was, at least in my words, let's just tell the truth about life. Let's just tell the truth about who we really are and
Yeah.
what our true essence is, and not try to be someone that we're not so someone will love us, or that someone will accept us, or that the world will embrace us in a better way. It's just, let's just be honest. Let's just say what's true. And she's communicated that to you a lot during your time.
Yeah, she did. She was a high EQ and a high IQ.
Right.
She spoke 2 languages fluently. She was a very, very brilliant woman, but grounded in such a way that she knew what was real. Love was real.
Mm-hmm.
Tango was real.
Right.
And life was real.
Yeah.
Cancer was surreal.
Yes.
And she didn't let it govern her life, but certainly inspired me to share the story in a more detailed way, in a more personal way. So,
well, I just have to say to all of our listeners, get this book, 126 Days, 11 Minutes. It's a beautiful tribute to a courageous and beautiful soul. It's a wonderful love story. And Larry, you did a great job of capturing everything in the pages between this cover of this book. I will put in the show notes how people can get a hold of the book and all the other things that you're doing as far as your coaching and some of the other things you have going on in your life. I really appreciate you being so courageous yourself to put all this out there, because that's not easy to do when it's so seeped in emotion. But I think it's obvious that you allowed your love for Gail and her love for you and the authenticity of that to rise above all of that and take care of each other in ways you would have never experienced if you hadn't met one another.
Well, Annie, I appreciate that. And there was a very wise woman that once said, during the tough times, keep your ass in the saddle.
Yes, keep your ass in the
Oh,
saddle.
I've done that.
You've certainly done that. Thanks so much. And all you
Thank you.
listeners out there, go get this book. You will not put it down once you pick it up. It's got a lot of wisdom in it. It's got a lot of love in it. And terrific job, Larry. Thanks for your time today. I really appreciate it.
Annie, I am so excited that we spent some time together. I appreciate all the kind words. I'm very honored and humbled to have been on your show. And I just love everything you're doing to serve out there as well.
Thank you. My pleasure to have you.